Let's dive in. You know the moment when even the old guard sits up and realizes something massive just happened? That was a scene in Rod Laver Arena when Carlos Alcaraz punched his fist in the air on championship point of the 2026 Australian Open. But this wasn't just another slam win. No. At 22 years and 258 days, Carlos didn't just win the title. He redefined his place in tennis history. He defeated Novak Djokovic, the 10-time Australian Open champion, in 4 sets, 2-6, 6-2, 6-3, 7-5. And while the scoreboard tells a story of momentum shifts and intense physical play, the real narrative is what Alcaraz unlocked with that victory. In this video, we're unpacking all the incredible milestones that Carlos achieved, why they matter, and how this one win may reshape the sport for years. But before I go full breakdown mode, let me ask you, do you think this puts Alcaraz ahead of Djokovic in the GOAT conversation already? Or is it still too early? Tell me in the comments right now. Okay, let's go. First, the career Grand Slam, done younger than anyone in history. Picture this, all 4 majors, at least once. That's the holy grail of tennis achievement. A career Grand Slam. You only get this if you show supreme skill, adaptability across surfaces, and mental steel that doesn't crack under pressure. Carlos had already won 2022 US Open, 2023 Wimbledon, 2024 French Open. But down under, that was the missing piece. And he didn't just win it, he owned it. At 22 years and 258 days, Carlos became the youngest man in history to complete the career Grand Slam. Let's put that in context. Before this, the record was held by Don Budge during the pre-Open era, and he was 22 years and 355 days old. That almost sounds like a tennis trivia question, right? But it's real. Carlos broke a record that has stood for nearly 90 years. Think about that. Surfaces were slower back then. Rackets were wood. Conditioning wasn't scientific. And yet that Budge mark survived until now. And Carlos didn't just slightly beat it. He smashed it. But here's where it gets really fascinating. Carlos is now only the 6th male player in the Open era to complete a career Grand Slam. Let that sink in. The others? Rod Laver, the legend. Andre Agassi, the comeback king. Roger Federer, the elegance. Rafael Nadal, the warrior king of clay. Novak Djokovic, the dominance incarnate. And now, Carlos Alcaraz, the new generation's crown jewel. That puts him in the absolute elite. Players dream of being in this list for a lifetime, but Alcaraz already made it. This isn't hype, this is history. Second, the 25 Titles Club, fastest in history. Now let's talk about something people don't immediately notice because they're obsessed with slams, consistency and speed of success. Carlos has now won 25 career titles. And get this, he needed only 82 main draw tournaments to hit that mark. Let's pause for a second. Think about how dominant that is. Not 120 events. Not 100. 82 events. That means Carlos asserts himself deep into tournaments more often than not. It means week after week, surface after surface, he's a threat. Of those 25 titles, 7 were Grand Slams. 8 were ATP Masters 1000s. 8 were ATP 500s. 2 were ATP 250s. That's a haul that balances peak performance with breadth across levels, which is a testament to his maturity. Most players take years to find consistency. Carlos built it before most 22-year-olds even figure out how to handle the media. Now here's a curveball. Which do you think is harder, winning 25 titles so fast or winning 7 slam titles before turning 23? I'll wait for your thoughts in the comments, because that brings us to third. Only the 2nd man to win 7 Grand Slams before age 23. This is a stat that will make folks start whispering in the GOAT direction. Carlos Alcaraz is only the 2nd male player in history to win 7 Grand Slams before age 23. The only other? The legendary Bjorn Borg. Let that sink in. Borg did it in an era dominated by wooden rackets, brutal training, and long 5-set epics with no modern recovery tech. Carlos did it in an era of fully optimized athletic competition, deeper fields, and relentless scheduling. Some could argue the eras are incomparable, but this is the fun part of sports. The legends across generations meet in numbers like these. Now let's break down that 7. 2 times Wimbledon, 2 times French Open, 2 times US Open, 1 times Australian Open. That's huge. We can talk all we want about style, charisma, baseline play, athleticism, but when the trophies are stacked like this at such a young age, that's legacy material. The only question left is, can he catch or even surpass the big 3 in slam count before they're done? If he wins Wimbledon again, if he defends the US Open, if he becomes the first to reach 10 slams, the narrative flips real fast. And honestly, I think he absolutely can. Tell me your prediction down below. 4th, beating Djokovic in his strongest arena. Now hold up. Let's get specific about the Australian Open final, because stat lines don't always convey drama, but this match did. Carlos lost the first set 2-6. That's not fringe. That's dominant from Djokovic. Looking at the scoreboard, you'd think this might be another story where experience crushes youth. But what happened next was the biggest emotional and tactical turning point of the match. Instead of folding under pressure, Carlos shifted gears. He didn't panic. He attacked. He found angles Djokovic couldn't reach. He used spin to pull Novak wide, and then finished points with fearless shot-making. He took the next 3 sets. 6-2, 6-3, 7-5. That's elite tennis. Not luck, not flashes of brilliance. Sustained control, especially against a 10-time Australian Open winner. And here's the deeper narrative twist. The Aussie Open has long been known as Novak's backyard. This is the place where he's nearly unbeatable. And yet, Carlos didn't just beat him. He dismantled him when it mattered. When Djokovic had the experience edge, the crowd energy, and the historical advantage, Carlos turned around. And that's why this one means more than just stats. This is a passing of the torch moment, whether fans want to call it that or not. Because beating Djokovic here in final, that's the kind of win that echoes. Curiosity gap. But wait, there's one secret stat no one's talking about yet. Before we move on to the final milestone, here's something I want you to remember. There's a number, a stat that analysts are just starting to dive into, that may show just how complete Alcaraz's game has become. And it's not about his serve speed. It's not about his forehand winners. It's about breakpoint resilience under pressure. We'll unpack that in a future video, because this one is already jam-packed. But trust me, that stat might tell us whether Alcaraz is already at the same level as peak Federer, Nadal, or Djokovic in clutch moments. Anyway, moving on. 5th milestone, the new pinnacle of versatility. Carlos Alcaraz winning all 4 Grand Slams by age 22 doesn't just make history. It highlights something deeper. He has now proven he can win on every surface. Think about that for a second. Australian Open, plexicushion/hard court. French Open, clay. Wimbledon, grass. US Open, hard court deco turf. Different bounce, different movement, different mental games. Winning on clay doesn't make you an automatic grass threat. Winning on hard courts doesn't automatically translate to dominance on clay. And yet, Carlos has now mastered all of them. That makes him more than a specialist. It makes him complete. He's a rare player who doesn't just adapt, he conquers. This versatility is what separates champions from legends. But here's the really big question. Will this Australian Open crown be the one that defines Carlos's legacy? Some people believe. Heavy checkmark Djokovic will come back stronger. Heavy checkmark Alcaraz's youth means he'll improve even more. Heavy checkmark the physical toll of tennis could challenge longevity. And honestly, all of those are fair takes. But here's my bold opinion. Carlos isn't just the next tennis superstar. He's the next era's face. Not because he's flashy, but because he backs it up with results. We've all seen great talents rise and fade. We've also seen players with this kind of grit. They don't just win, they insist on winning. And that mindset, that belief, that's what separates the good from the great. If we look at his trajectory, US Open at 19, Wimbledon at 20, French Open at 21, Australian Open at 22, 25 titles in 82 events, career Grand Slam, 7 slams before 23. He's beaten every top rival on every surface. He's not stopping, not even close. So here's your chance to weigh in. In your opinion, Will Alcaraz finish with more slams than Djokovic and Nadal? Or will the big three still hold the top spots? Why? Answer that in the comments. I'm reading every single one. Final thoughts. What this means for tennis. This Australian Open wasn't just another tournament. It wasn't just another trophy. It was a statement. It was evidence that the torch is being carried. And not just being carried lightly, but being carried with fire. Carlos Alcaraz is now heavy checkmark youngest career Grand Slam holder. Heavy checkmark second man ever with 7 slams before 23. Heavy checkmark fastest to 25 titles in main draw history. Heavy checkmark a player capable of beating Djokovic on his strongest court. And honestly, that's already a legendary resume. And he's just getting started. Imagine where he'll be at 25, at 26, at 30. The tennis world is watching, and honestly, so am I. This is not just history. This is the next chapter of tennis greatness. I want to hear from you. Which milestone was the most impressive? And which one do you think matters most for his legacy? Type your answer in the comments and explain why. I'll be responding to as many as I can. And if you want a deep dive video on that clutch injection stat I mentioned earlier, comment clutch stats below. Let's go. Thanks for watching Tennis IQ, where we break down the biggest moments in tennis with passion, clarity, and a bit of edge. If you love tennis as much as we do, you're already family. Stay tuned for more analysis, debate, and future milestones. Keep pushing your tennis IQ higher, and I'll see you in the next one.